Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Russell Targ. First, I have a couple of announcements. The third annual Forbidden Gathering will be held August 18th, 19th, and 20th in Fort Collins, Colorado. We still have room for a few more left to attend the festivities. We'll be having celebrations, hiking, live podcasts, and more. So if you'd like to attend, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. We hope to see some of you there. Today I want to welcome Russell Targ. He is a physicist, author, and pioneer in the development of the laser and laser applications. He has received 2 National Aeronautics and Space Administration awards for inventions and contributions in lasers and laser communications, and has published over 100 scientific papers on lasers, plasma physics, and ESP research. In the 1970s and 80s, he co-founded and worked for the CIA-sponsored Stanford Research Institute investigation into psychic abilities. Russell, welcome. How you doing?
I'm just fine. I'm happy to be with you. It's a good time to talk about forbidden knowledge.
Yes.
You got UFOs just blessed by the government, and my previously secret material has been declassified by the CIA. So I can tell you about it, tell you everything I know.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we are living in incredible times, and like you said, it's a great time for forbidden knowledge, and I'm so happy to finally get you on. I've been trying to do this for a while. Like I was telling you before, I was blessed enough to have your publicist reach out to me, and the universe came together, so I'm honored to have you as a guest today, and you're one of the pioneers in psychic research, and you've made a great contribution to the field, and you're now helping regular folks like myself learn how to tap into incredible consciousness abilities. And you have a new book, which we're going to be getting into today. But before we do any of that, for those that may not be familiar with you, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, before we get too far?
Well, I'm a physicist. I was working in lasers from the 1960s. Before there were any lasers. I was working with Gordon Gould in New York on the development of the first laser. Then I went on to build a very powerful one of a 1,000-watt carbon dioxide laser in 1960, and that was the most powerful laser in the world at that time. So by 1960, I decided this is a good time to bail out of lasers and go into the field I always wanted to be in, which is studying psychic abilities. So I was able to pack up my laser experience that I've done for the CIA and for NASA and convince CIA and NASA that they should give me money to start a program to teach people how to get in touch with their psychic abilities. So I went to NASA, and I was at a meeting and ran into Werner von Braun, and I had an ESP teaching machine, 4-choice ESP game, which you could actually find. It's now on the Apple Store. So the game is called ESP Trainer. And von Braun did super well with this 4-choice game. And I told him that I want to teach astronauts how to get in touch with their spacecraft so they don't have surprise crashes. But I was aware that in 1963, there was a near crash of Apollo 13. And if the astronauts had been aware of the thing that was failing on the outside, they could have prevented a big crash. And von Braun knew all about that. And he was a lifetime explorer of psychic abilities. He and his grandmother were very psychic together, little known fact. So he did super well with my ESP game. And he then took me to the administrator of all of NASA, James Fletcher. And so Targ here has built lasers for us in the past, and he wants to teach people how to get in touch with their psychic ability. And all he wants is $80,000 for a program. And Fletcher said, "Well, where are you working now?" And I told him, "Well, if I'm going to do this ESP program, I'm going to try and move from Sylvania Laser Company to Stanford Research Institute." And at that moment, another coincidence, Edgar Mitchell came walking by, and he said, "I couldn't help overhear your program. I'm just starting to work on a new program with SRI. I could introduce Russell to the president of SRI, and if you're offering him 80K, I think we can make a deal." So within a week, my idea of doing an ESP program at Stanford came to fruition, and Edgar Mitchell and the contract monitor came with me to meet the president of SRI. And in May of 1972, we had a program called Stargate at SRI. I started that together with another laser guy, Hal Putoff. So Hal Putoff and I ran that program for 20 years, teaching all sorts of people how to get in touch with their psychic abilities, principally teaching people from the CIA how to use their ability to find kidnapped agents, downed airplanes, Russian atomic bomb factories, all sorts of things the CIA were interested in. And we had a very nice relationship with Kit Green and Ken Kress, who were top scientists at CIA, and they worked with us. And we did that all for 20 years.
Now, at any point, were they requesting experiments or results with something beyond just the remote viewing, such as remote influencing or affecting people's physical reality in any way?
We were not doing that. We beyond ordinary ESP. We were also looking into the future to describe what's going to happen the next day or the next week. And so, as physicists, we're interested in data, and we wanted to know how far into the future can you look with your psychic ability? How far into the distance can you look? And what we find is that increasing the distance does not degrade the accuracy or the reliability. That it's no harder to sit in Palo Alto and describe an atomic bomb factory in Siberia. That's no more difficult than to describe where somebody is hiding in Stanford, 5 miles from my house.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as we know, these programs, as they were known at that time, are no longer in operation. But they had to have taken some of the information they've learned and implemented it into newer projects and experiments. What do you think that these programs have shifted and morphed into, and how do you think that they're implementing the information they learned into our modern programs?
Well, I just made a film of the same name as my book, Third Eye Spies. Third Eye Spies is based on a movie that I produced 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And in that film, we had Kit Green, who's a physician and researcher for the CIA for many years. And he was willing to assure me that even though the program has been canceled, that the CIA is still pursuing this. And we had trained a couple of CIA agents who became very good at doing remote viewing. But remote viewing, I would have somebody come into my office and say, "I don't believe in this stuff. Show me something psychic." And I say, "Well, I'm not going to show you something psychic because then you'll think it's a trick. Because I used to be a magician. So I'm not going to show you something psychic. I will show you how to do it. So we're going to have your partner go hide somewhere where we'll have a random target chosen by an administrator. He will give my partner and your buddy traveling instructions. They'll go somewhere in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and I will help you to experience where they are. So I will have this shocked person sitting at my office table, and I will say to him, just quiet your mind. I'm not asking you to do anything difficult. Your buddy is hiding someplace in San Francisco Bay Area at an interesting site. I have no idea where it could be. Just tell me about the surprising images that show up in your awareness. Just quiet your mind, and what surprises you that appears. You can't do this wrong, because all I want to know is what you're experiencing. And with those kind of non-directive instructions, most people were able to do very well to pretty well describing where their partner is hiding. So that's what I did for a living for a decade.
Now, what was?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, what was it like for you to work with individuals like Ingo Swann?
Well, Ingo is a remarkable person, a visionary artist, and he invented remote viewing for us. My partner Hal and I are physicists, so we were going to do physics kinds of experiments, put a laser in a box and ask him if it's turned on or turned off. What's the picture on the wall? And Ingo said, if I want to know the picture on the wall, I'll open the door. If I want to know what's in the box, I'll open the box. What you're asking me for is a trivialization of my ability. Let me show you what I can actually do. You go hide someplace in the Bay Area, and I'll describe where it is. And he did that excellently. We published that, and that's also in our film. And what we realized is that a person has to be motivated to describe something out of his body, out of existence, to be interested enough to do the experiment. And naturalistic outdoor targets are much easier to describe than the object in the box. And actually, Carl Jung visited J.B. Rhine, the founder of modern ESP research, and he criticized Rhine was doing experiments with special cards that he made up, circle, square, stars. You may know about them. That's much harder to do than describe where someone's hiding, because once you know that your target is a circle, square, star, or cross, once you know that's the possibility, they stand in your memory as targets of interest. They stand as noise. If I tell you I'm thinking of a playing card, an ordinary deck of cards, the first thing that pops into mind is generally the ace of spades. And the fact that you know all the playing cards very well makes it hard to separate the psychic signal from the mental noise. So if I tell you instead, I've got an interesting object on my desk here, which you can describe, but you've probably never seen it. The object I was going to choose happened not to be there right now. So I can tell you that I have an interesting object on my desk that you probably have not seen, if ever. Tell me about the mystery object. That's easier to describe than a playing card. Because I've set the stage so that we've agreed you're not going to guess, because the target you're trying to describe is not something that you're likely to.
Now, would you say that there is a limit distance-wise for remote viewing, for having the ability to gauge different objects or activities over a long distance? Is there a limit to this, or can we go even as far as other planets?
I was just going to give you another planet. In the course of one of the original program we had was with the ESP teaching machine, the four choice trainer. And my contract monitor from NASA came by to see how we're doing. Are people learning to improve their skill? And he saw that he played with this game for a while and saw that our data showed that learning was taking place. And he said, we're sending a spacecraft off to Jupiter as part of the Pioneer program. Pioneer number 2, we're sending to Jupiter. And he asked Ingo, your paintings often have planets and stars on them. Could you tell right now, are we going to find anything new when we get to Jupiter? And he goes, so yeah, give me a piece of paper and I'll draw something for you, because he's an artist. So he said, I see Jupiter, and there's a large ring, an ice ring all the way around Jupiter, much larger than the ordinary rings that you see. He said, the contract monitor said, you must be thinking of Saturn. Saturn is the planet with the rings. And Ingo said, if I was looking at Saturn, I tell you that I've been looking at the solar system for my entire life. If I tell you I'm looking at Jupiter, I'm looking at Jupiter. And when your spacecraft gets there, you'll see that there are large ice rings around Jupiter, much larger than around Saturn. Mm-hmm. And 7 months later, the spacecraft got to Jupiter, and they sent back pictures showing the ice rings. Now, there are a number of things interesting about that. First of all, it's interesting that Ingo could just put down a cigar and draw a picture of what's going on at Jupiter with no preamble, no meditation, just what do you want to see, and I'll draw it for you. The other thing that's very interesting is that he told us at once what he sees in Jupiter, and that turned out to be correct. That is, there are a couple of very large ice rings around Jupiter that no one knew about, and Ingo drew pictures of those, and I show that all in my new book, Third Eye Spies. I show Ingo's picture of the ice rings. And what's interesting for a physicist is that Ingo was able to close his eyes and within a couple of minutes tell us what he sees on Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is 500 million miles away. And if you're counting, that would be 40 light seconds. It takes light 40, I misspoke, 40 ice minutes. So it takes 40 minutes for light to come from Jupiter to the Earth. But Ingo was able to do that at once. So in modern physics, there's evidence within modern physics that things can be entangled and communicating faster than the speed of light. But there's a strong feeling in the physics community that you cannot use modern quantum physics to send messages. And the reason they can't accept that is that Ingo sent us a message way faster than the speed of light. And that gives great heartburn to professional physicists. But there's no doubt about this. The experiment we did was very simple. Ingo, tell us what's going on Jupiter.
Mm.
We know that it's 500 million miles away, and it takes light 40 minutes to get to us. But you can just write down right now a piece of paper uh, what you see, and he did that, and that took him no time at all.
Now,
So what's clear is that for psychic ability, there is no distance. That is, the universe for consciousness is there is always a path from one place to another, and you can find a path of zero distance. So to answer your question, it's no harder to describe what's going on Jupiter than it is to describe what's going on in Colorado.
now, what about past and future events? Do you have the ability to foresee future events, even or past events, with this technique as well?
That's right. Shortly after I left SRI, I want people always say, "Well, what's this good for? You're not looking for kidnapped CIA agents anymore. What are you going to do with this?" And I said, I had formed an organization called Delphi Associates, and had the idea that we could use this for looking into the future of the stock market. So working with an experienced psychic, Keith Harari, we decided that we would try and forecast changes in the silver commodity market, so that we couldn't ask him to look at the big board, the commodity exchange board in New York. I could say, Keith, here we are in California. Look at the commodity exchange board in Wall Street. That is not possible to do with ESP, because you can do a lot of things with psychic abilities, but you can't read in general. Some people can read, most people cannot read. So we had to create a kind of code, which our friend Stephen Schwartz invented, the idea of substituting objects for what you want to know. That is to say, the broker will choose 4 objects. Let's say he'll look around his office and say, I see a plant, I see a cup of coffee, I see a lamp, and my leftover pancake from breakfast. Those are my 4 objects. And he plans that each of those stands for up a little, up a lot, down a little, down a lot. It's an arbitrary assignment. Nobody in the world knows what he's done there. So I know that he's done that, and I will sit with Harari at my kitchen table, and we did this 9 times in a row successfully, and made $250,000 in the market. And it was published in the Wall Street Journal. So what my partner has to do is I say, I'm going to give you something here we are on Monday. I'm going to give you in your hand something next Monday. We're not talking about stock market. We're not talking about prices. We want to just focus on what he's going to experience. So I'm going to give you something interesting in your hand. Probably would be Friday to Friday is what we did. Next Friday, I'm going to put something in your hand. It'll be an interesting, unusual object. What do you experience? And he said, well, it's something round and kind of floppy. It's got a bad smell. And that's basically what I get. I get the round, floppy thing with a bad smell. And that would be I could, as an interviewer, I would recognize that as a good description because that's quite unusual. They're all straight. You would rarely have a person say that.
Hmm.
So I said, okay, Keith, I'll see you next Friday, and I'll have an interesting object for you. So I then called John in Marin, California, the broker, and I tell him I got an interesting description. What are your four objects? He said, I got a plant, I got a cup of coffee, I have a light bulb, and I got my leftover pancake from breakfast. And I said, well, it sounds to me like he's describing your leftover pancake. What do you think? He said, that's what it sounds like to me. And I said, well, what does that mean? Well, on my table this week, a leftover pancake is associated with down aloft. We call it associative remote viewing because he's not doing anything with the market. All he wants to do is tell me what I'm going to give him next Friday.
Hmm.
So the association of what he said is with the idea of the market going down a lot. So based on that, we sold $30,000 worth of silver, and the market went down.
Hmm.
We're going against the Hunt brothers who are buying silver.
Yeah.
So that was one of our biggest hits. So out of the 9 trials we did, Harari correctly described all 9. 7 of them were executed as transfers. The broker didn't. The broker passed on 2 of them, which were correct. Otherwise, we'd have had 10 for 10. Because in 2 of the cases, what Harari was forecasting was so far from what a broker would do on that day that he couldn't go against it. The broker is sitting there spending money from our foundation. The people were giving us money, and he said, I can't go into the market on this day selling silver when it's obvious that it's going to go up. So on 2 of the days, we were out of the market because the broker didn't want to be in the market. But on all 7 days when we were in the market, we were correct. And we made $250,000 for
Hmm.
our 7 trials.
I'd love to get your insights into the different types and techniques used for remote viewing, such as controlled remote viewing versus the other types that you were just describing.
What I'm describing is what I did in the lab for a decade.
Hmm.
That is, I was sort of pushed into the lab as I worked first of all with Pat Price, who did not need any instructions, and I just sort of made up what to do with him. Because I had studied psychology, so I had an idea of how you work with a person, honoring him and respecting what he says, and sort of jollying him around. But I had no training for doing remote viewing. I just sort of made it up. What I'm describing here today is what I think of as ordinary remote viewing.
Hmm.
Ordinary remote viewing means that Pat Price or some other person sitting with me, and I ask him, "What are you experiencing?" That was my version of remote viewing. Now, Ingo wanted to sort of own remote viewing. He wanted to produce something that would be really a guidebook that was Ingo Swan's way of doing this, that he could give to the Army when we eventually were working with the Army, training recruits how to do remote viewing. So Ingo made a guidebook which became controlled remote viewing, which is much more complicated than what I'm describing. Mm. So Ingo's well, to answer your question, controlled remote viewing is a sort of quantized version of what I just told you. Mm-hmm. That they want to know, does it feel heavy? What color is it? How do you feel about it? There's a whole group of questions in numerical order that you can ask a person, all of which would fall out of what I'm asking him. But this controlled remote viewing allows you to have a book, and the government says, here's the government way to do remote viewing. Ingo is happy because there's something there that he can own. Mm. So controlled remote, that I offered to have a ESP off with any of the people trained with remote viewing. I said, well, why don't we just have a contest? We'll get some person who you've trained with your scheme, and let them walk into my office, and I'll do what I do, and we'll see who does better. And nobody wanted to do that. So the controlled remote, basically remote viewing is just what I described to you. Is of the form, if you want it to work, you don't ask the person to describe the thing or describe the place. You ask them you set the stage so they're describing their experience. Mm.
Now, would you say that anybody has the ability to do this? Do you have a higher potential if you have tendencies for other psychic or consciousness abilities?
You'll do better if you're willing to be psychic. One of my favorite, I worked with dozens of people in my little office. I was sitting like the Oracle of Menlo Park on the top floor of the radiophysics building, and they would bring me people, and I would show them one after another how to do remote viewing. We started out with our ordinary people who were around SRI, some of them very talented, like Pat Price was a psychic policeman, and he was actually able to look into a building at the NSA and describe what was inside the building and actually read some file cards with the names of top secret ongoing programs. And that excited people very greatly because these were ongoing programs, and they didn't like the idea of their secrecy being broken. Mm-hmm. And Price was a very unusual person. But by and large, to start the program, where we were teaching Army recruits how to do remote viewing. That was part of the I'm trying to think. This is now 50 years ago. The INSCOM, I was trying to remember the name INSCOM, which is the Intelligence Command. Mm-hmm. So I had officers from INSCOM in Fort Meade, and I was showing them how to do remote viewing. And I had 6 people that we chose from an interview, and 4 of them did excellently, and 2 of them never figured it out. So it's not that everybody in the world can do excellently, but the fact that we had six people that I chose from the floor of the gymnasium, and four of them did excellently. What that means is that they described 5 or 6 out of 6 targets. They were able to describe where somebody is hiding in a double-blind way. That is, I didn't know that. I never know the answer. That is, these experiments is double-blind in that I'm the interviewer, and I see if you're sitting with me and your friend has been taken away, and you want to know where is Joe? Where is Joe? The question of the day, and I don't know where Joe is, and my job is to help you describe where your friend is. But I'm always blind as to where the answer is. Consequently, if you say Joe's gone to Macy's, I know that doesn't sound like remote viewing. It sounds like a guess. You're naming something. And I say, no, let's not, I won't say that's wrong. I'll just say that doesn't sound like a remote viewing. Let's start over. And I'll say, what do you experience that makes you say Macy's? And you will then go back and tell me what you're experiencing, and we can get to the right answer. So the interviewer has a keen ear for what remote viewing sounds like. So even though I never know the answer, I mean, they could be at a bridge or a bowling alley or a park or anything. I have no idea where. Palo Alto, Bay Area is full of interesting bridges, rivers, all kinds of stuff. So it could be anything at all. In a community full of rivers and bridges. So I have no idea where they are, but I know what remote viewing sounds like. So I'm able to help them. I did that right up to the Undersecretary of Defense, who was going to support our idea of creating an Army Psychic Corps. So he said, I want to see something. This is Walter LaBerge, Undersecretary of Defense. He said, I want to see something psychic. So he came to my lab, and what he had in mind is that Ingo or Pat Price would do a remote viewing for him. And I explained to him that if Ingo does a remote viewing for where you're hiding, you're going to think it's a trick. But if you describe where Ingo, if you describe where your major is hiding, you'll know it's not a trick because it's your experience. And so I did that with the Undersecretary, and he did a very good job. He saw this circular building made of bricks. And in fact, they had gone to an art institute in that one town north of us. And it was a sort of art plaza. And everybody was sitting around drinking coffee by this fountain, which was a circle made of bricks. So he was very impressed. He compared his drawing with the thing that he was looking at. And he saw that they matched excellently. And he gave us the money to start the Stargate program.
Now, am I correct in saying that at some point the CIA was attempting to integrate substances like LSD into these studies?
Yes, in the very beginning, we met with Sid Gottlieb, who was the godfather of the
MK Ultra.
Exactly, MK Ultra program.
Yeah.
And he said people would do much better if you gave them LSD. It's much easier to hallucinate. And I said, yes, that's true. It'll create lots of pictures. If you give them marijuana, also will create lots of pictures but we don't want lots of pictures. Because the skill element of remote viewing is separating the psychic signal from the mental noise. And if you give people something like LSD, they lose their analytic ability and go off into dreamland. And we don't want them in dreamland. We want the psychic to be able to have psychic information flowing in, but not overwhelmed with all kinds of crazy things that don't pertain to what he wants to see. Giving a person LSD would hugely increase the noise, but not help with the signal. And I explained that to Sid Gottlieb, who, apart from being a notorious torturer, he was a very nice guy. We enjoyed sitting around with him, like my old Uncle Sid, the basement of the CIA, surrounded by books while he puffs his pipe. So really quite amiable, knowledgeable, well-read person. Now, he spent his life torturing people. That's too bad. But he was very supportive of our program. And he was really the one who was pushing LSD. And I said, from my experience with LSD, that's the opposite of what we want to do. And he understood that. He was familiar with the idea of states of consciousness. So we never gave any kind of drugs to our people at all.
Now, what was? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said, from my own experience, I was given some marijuana, which very highly recommended, somebody's special marijuana, and this is really the best indicus. This is the best thing you've ever seen. So I thought, oh, that's terrific. I'll try that. And somebody goes hide someplace, and I was totally overwhelmed with a picture show. I felt very disappointed and kind of angry but with a learning experience. That is, powerful marijuana will cover your screen with all kinds of pictures, no doubt about it. But those pictures don't necessarily pertain to where the person is hiding.
Would you say that the ability to meditate and put yourself into these altered states of consciousness without the effects of drugs or outside substances is key to being able to achieve these abilities of remote viewing as well?
I would say being able to quiet your mind is helpful. The people don't have to meditate. If a person is an experienced meditator, he's going to be able to quiet his mind. At one point, the head of our laboratory wanted me to do remote viewing with a famous physicist, Yakin Aronov, the famous Nobel candidate from Israel, who had done very interesting experiments with David Bohm. So Aronov was sitting with me in my quiet little lab, and the head of our lab went to hide someplace with Hal Puthoff, my partner. And I was sitting with Aronov and said, you know, we're doing, your friend is hiding someplace in the Bay Area. And he said, well, let me tell you at the beginning, when I close my eyes, it's dark. I don't know how it is for you. So I said, well, can you describe what images come to pass? He said, you don't understand. I just told you there aren't any images, it's just dark. And we did that for about half an hour. And I said, well, they're coming back now. Why don't you just free associate? Pretend you can see something. You can do that, right? Just pretend you see something, and tell me about that. He said, well, it's really the remote viewing. What I suddenly see is a couple of ducks walking across my field of view, like the duck. My mother has a duck farm in Israel, and this reminds me of her duck farm. And I said, well, that's great. Can you draw me a duck? He said, yeah, I can do that. And 20 minutes later, they came back and told us they had gone to the Palo Alto duck pond. So this is a case where the guy is not a meditator, not interested in ESP, is pretty hostile to the whole idea, but is not stupidly hostile. That he sort of understands. As physicists physicists are often very good remote viewers because they can follow instructions. That is, he didn't believe in anything what we're doing, but he could follow instructions. So in a way, that's one of my favorite experiments, because he was not an experienced meditator. He was not interested in the ESP. He thought the whole thing was nonsense. But remote viewing is such a natural ability that he was able to follow my instructions.
Now, earlier when we first started, you had mentioned how interesting a time we are because of the revelations and disclosure about possibilities of extraterrestrials and UFOs. Throughout your history of being involved with remote viewers, have you had many experiences where they have picked up on extraterrestrials or non-human intelligences?
No, we have not had that. That is, in order for that to happen, I would have to ask them, push them in that direction. Because we're in sort of a Rogerian scheme where the person settles down and we have an agreement that I will honor what he's doing and he will try and do what I tell him to do. So Pat Price once said, I often see UFO bases, and I can tell you where there's some UFO bases. There's one on the mountain in Alaska. There's another one in Brazil, another one in Australia, and he marked those out. And we gave those to the CIA, and they said, three of your four places we're already considering as bases for UFOs. So, Pat Price was exceptionally good remote viewer in that he was the only one we've ever had who was able to read things. We were well into the program, and our contract monitor, Kit Green, said, can't you get somebody who has never done this before? Can you get a control? And I said, yeah, I can get somebody. And I asked my friend Hella Hamed, who was a very successful professional photographer, had done a lot of that, made films, traveled all over the world. Very worldly wise woman, and she just thought it would be a hoot. Very, very amusing to come to Palo Alto and be a psychic spy for the CIA and be paid for that. That would be a whole new experience for her. And she promised me she had never done anything like that before. And we did experiments like what we did with Pat Price, in that Hal Puthoff would hide himself at a random place in the Bay Area, and she would have to describe where he was so that somebody could match up his description against where he actually was. And that's a random task that I would give you 9 drawings of places where you might be hidden, and you'd have to match those up as best you could against where you actually were. And it turned out that Hella did that better than anybody else we've ever seen. The point is, Hella was a control subject, never did this before, didn't know it. She was sophisticated, so she understood what we're doing. That what we were trying to do made sense to her, but she'd never done anything like that before. But in a formal, numerically evaluated scheme, she did better than the most psychic person we ever saw, who was Pat Price. Pat Price gets the rating of the best ever because he could read alphabets, and nobody else could do that.
I don't remember the guest name that I had on, but they were speaking about remote viewing, attempting to remote view highly secure locations like within the White House, and having some sort of block by a presence there that was protecting that area astrally. Is this something that you're familiar with?
I understand what you're saying. I did not have that experience. Now, the early experiment we did with Price, he was just given coordinates, geographical coordinates, and he described just drifting up in the air, and 5,000 feet below him, he saw this army base, and he just drifted in. And the army base he saw was the Sugar Grove facility of the NSA, which is probably at that time one of the most secret things in America. With a top secret facility used for snooping on the Russians. We were listening in on Russian signals bounced off the moon. And the fact that Price could drift into the basement of that place and read off the cards, enumerating the names of ongoing projects, was enough to totally freak out the people who were running that. In fact, after he did that, we got a visit at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, got a visit from the security of the NSA, who came to visit us with the CIA people who gave us the coordinates. The NSA was very angry with the CIA. Why are you targeting these California psychics on the most secure thing in the whole NSA? And the coordinates we were given were actually a log cabin down the road from this building. It was the building in a hilly area, and the CIA coordinates were over the hill. So as we were all together, the CIA guy and the NSA guy, and Hal and me, and Pat Price, they turned to Price and said, "Why did you describe our underground facility where your target was actually a log cabin?" And Price said, "Well, the way it works in my way of thinking, my experience, the more you hide something, the more it shines like a beacon in psychic space."
For the last few minutes we have, let's talk a little bit about what you offer people in the book. You actually teach basic techniques on how folks can do this themselves, right?
Yeah, right now, if you go to the internet and look up remote viewing, you'll find that dozens or perhaps hundreds of people are teaching remote viewing and charging thousands of dollars to do that. And it's not that difficult. It's a natural ability. It's like charging people to riding a unicycle looks like an impossible thing to do, but some people can just. My daughter had very good balance, and the 5-year-old, I gave her a unicycle. She just rode off and took her rode to school on a unicycle. So I I put her on it and gave her a push, but I didn't teach her to do anything. And the remote viewing is like that. Uh, Many people just take to it immediately, and you just tell them what to do, and they do it. Other people have to be sort of coaxed along. Now, I don't remember what
In
were
your
your
book,
questions?
you actually give people basic techniques to do this on their own.
Oh, that's the idea. That it sort of annoys me that people are charging lots of money to do something which is a natural ability.
Mm-hmm.
That is that is at a cocktail party or any quiet place, you can sit down with a person in a quiet location and make it clear this is not a test. You're not testing them to see if they're psychic. You know that this is something that human beings are able to do. And if you set the stage properly, people can do this just because you set the stage correctly and are asking them to describe their experience rather than tell me about the building. So I somehow, maybe from my psychological training in college, I had the idea of what you should be saying to a person to empower them, to give them the ability to do this. So I did. So I basically have spent the past 50 years after I went. I had a friend in Italy, so my wife and I would go to Italy in the summertime, and we did that for 5 years. Each summer, I would go to a public meeting that was being held by a astrology organization. So I would have a room full of nice-looking Milanese women in their cute black dresses and very enthusiastic. And they did very, very well. In fact, the Italian women did better than any group that I'd ever worked with, except maybe for the American Dowsing Society. The old men in the overalls, who were professional dowsers, did as well as the Milanese women.
Yeah.
And my last visit to Italy, we had a plenary session, and I told them the story. I said, you know, I've been here now 5 times over the last 5 years, and you all do better than any other group outside of the professional psychics. Why do you think that the Italian women are so successful? And a woman held up her hand and said, that's very easy to understand. Everybody knows the Italian women are the most beautiful and they're the most sexy. Why shouldn't they be the most psychic? And I think, you know, in a way, that's a hidden explanation. That these women are tough. They are used to getting their own way. Have very high self-confidence. Whereas I can say the women in Silicon Valley where I live, if you give them a test like this, they view it as a test. Am I going to be able to pass muster? Where the Italian women assume that if I'm asking them to do something, then they will be able to do that, and they did. I did 5. I won't going into numbers. I did 5 formal visits to Italy, and all 5 of those were independently statistically significant. So if I were trying to get a PhD in psychology or remote viewing, these double-blind experiments with the Italian women would be significant at 1 in a million.
Excellent. Well, Mr. Targ, I thank you so much, and this book is amazing. For people that want to pick it up, I'll have the link right in the description. They can just click it and order it from there, but they can also get it from Amazon. Is that right?
That's right.
Excellent. Go pick up that book. Thank you so much for coming on, Mr. Targ. I'd love to speak with you again in the future. There's much more we could discuss.
The book is called Third Eye Spies. It's the same name as a 2-hour movie called Third Eye Spies, which we made because I was able to get Ken Kress and Kit Green for the CIA. I got the 2 CIA guys on screen saying, yes, I worked with Targ, and what he describes actually happened, and it was actually useful to us at the CIA. This stuff really works. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was so unusual to get the CIA to endorse anything that is worth making a movie.
Definitely. Yes, check out the movie, check out the book. Mr. Targ, thank you so much. We will definitely talk again in the future. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will talk again tomorrow.